Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Nothing Exempt. I'm Brian Piotr. I'm here with my co host Nicholas Pardini, and this is another island show. Today on our show, we are going to talk about a Caribbean island, St. Bart's. This is a tiny island.
Yeah, the full name is Saint Barthélemy. I'm not very good at my French, I guess, based on the way I said that, but it was originally named after Christopher Columbus's brother, Bartholomew.
Yeah, it is a 10 square mile island southeast Bahamas, or southeast of, in the southeast part of the Caribbean, that is extremely wealthy considering its size, very high GDP. It gets about 40 inches of rain every year, sunshine, average temperature 77 degrees, extremely beautiful and very small and very exclusive. Probably not some place for the average person on an average budget to go to, but extremely attractive for someone who's a tripster like Nick and maybe me. So, Nick, how do you get there?
Oh, it's very difficult to get there. It's not like just flying to some famous luxury destination. You just be able to go straight there from New York or LA. You have to connect through a smaller Caribbean island because it's a very small island and it has one of the smallest airports of any major tourist destination. Uh, like the runway is only about 2,000 feet long, which Brian is an aerospace guy. Is that like really tiny?
Yeah, it means you're not getting a big plane on that island ever.
Yeah, I think they have a max of 20-seat planes, and so as a result, there's really only a few nearby places you can fly to from there. You can fly there from uh, Guadeloupe, which is another French island that is a French incorporated region that's nearby. You could fly there from Antigua, fly there from Saint Martin, or the Virgin Islands, or San Juan, Puerto Rico. And to get to those places, you just connect through major cities in America: New York, Miami, Dallas, Houston, Charlotte, and then to get to those cities, just wherever you're coming from to one of those, that's it's going to take you probably at least two stops to get to St. Bart's.
Or, Nick, the alternate method is your giant private yacht.
Oh yeah, I mean you could take a boat there,
Yeah, your luxury yacht is the alternative method of getting there.
but we're not all David Geffen who quarantine on their yachts in the middle of the ocean. I mean, we talk to the everyman on this show.
I'm pretty sure that the almost every man, or pretty much anyone who's not at the top, is who we talk to on the show.
Yeah,
So demographics, there's only about 10,000 people on the island right now. The heritage is mostly French, and that means they are also mostly Catholic. There are a couple of French cuisine academies or colleges or whatever they call their schools on the island that services the tourist industry. And so some of the best French cuisine that you can get outside of France are restaurants on the island of St. Bart's. But they also mix in some West Indian, some Creole, some Italian. It's, a kind of a mixing pot of other cuisines that you can find on the island as well as French cuisine. It's a restaurant, hotel, tourist destination, and a great place to find the best food anywhere in the world, especially in the Caribbean.
you know what's going to be hilarious? They'll probably one day have more people listen to this episode of this podcast than the population of St. Bart's.
Yeah, true. But will we ever have very many people on the island of St. Bart's ever listen? I don't know, especially with the language distribution. Uh, it's about less than half of the population speaks English fluently.
That's a lot for a French territory.
Yeah, and considering the tourist industry, that's probably the main reason why. But going into the history, What's going on this island, Nick? What's it? How did it get from the beginning of time to now?
Okay, in the early period, it was possibly visited by Taino and Arawak people, but it was not really ever inhabited permanently because it didn't have enough water or soil to basically allow for human settlement. Uh, and it never became really. It was discovered by Columbus, and it was originally settled by the French in 1648, but it never really became a big economic powerhouse such as Haiti, which was known as Saint Domingue back then, or Barbados or Jamaica, because it just wasn't big enough and it didn't have enough arable land for a plantation economy. So it also explains why the demographics are somewhat different in St. Bart's. It's not as overwhelmingly African as some of the other Caribbean islands, just because they didn't really bring a large amount. There were some slaves there, and but it wasn't to the same degree as other Caribbean islands. And then in the 18th century, the Swedish acquired the island in 1784 from the French in exchange of trading privileges to the port of Gothenburg. The Swedes named the capital Gustavia, which is why the capital for a French island is named after a Swedish king, Gustav. So Gustavia is the capital, and it was kind of a free port known to trade a variety of goods all over the region. Um, they got rid of slavery by law in 1787, but the last slave was really granted their freedom to 1847. Um, there was a big hurricane in the 1850s, and then in 1878 they gave the island back to France, the Swedish, and then it became a full incorporated part of France in 1946, and it started to develop into a tourist destination in the 60s and the 70s when people such as Howard Hughes and the Rothschild family and Rockefeller and Chevy Chase and Jimmy Buffett decided to start hanging out there, and it rapidly modernized from that point.
Okay, and keeping on in 2007, they separated from Guadeloupe Island, and now they are their own overseas territory of the French Parliament. So they're part of the European Union. You can go there, and even though you'll have a French passport, you're a member of the European Union, overseas territories.
Well, it kind of became more of an overseas territory, not really a formal part of the EU after 2012.
So what's the difference in their rights, though? I don't understand that. Do you understand that, Nick?
Well, I mean, they don't. I'm not really sure, actually, to be honest with you. I think it means you don't have to
So,
follow. They still use the euro as a currency there, so
but
it's.
if you're born in St. Bart's, can you decide you want to go work in Italy?
I think you. I'm not really sure, really, to be honest with you. You
That that
probably
that
can through
I was trying to
France.
figure that out, and I could not understand the law at all. And I was like, oh, whatever. Let's post this on the subreddit or something for St. Bart's and see if someone else would tell us. That's
I've heard.
basically what we're going to do. I ask you if you're listening to this that you tell us how does it actually work legally when you try to do something like that.
Yeah, like do. I mean, I'm assuming just given how small the island is, I'm assuming a lot of the younger population who grows up there either goes to university or maybe has their first job or two out of college somewhere else before coming back to St. Bart's. So I mean, that has to happen some way or another.
Yeah, and we're not talking about a country that, or sorry, a territory that they really would avoid it. Like that, St. Bart's is well off. The people there are as much French citizens as anywhere else. They'd be completely welcome. So
Yeah,
I imagine that the legal hurdles are low.
yeah. Do you have anything else to say on the governance or the politics or the economic climate there?
Well, I don't feel like there was enough information for me or that I feel qualified to actually discuss nitty gritty of like what really matters on the island for the politics. Like what are the local issues that go on, like tourist industry, the right to like buy land, build hotels. I'm sure that there's like the normal arguments that happen among peoples and companies, but I don't think that anything really stood out when I tried to figure out what the local politics were of the day.
there is like
Mainly,
a
it was
there
the
is a
administrative the administrative laws are basically everything that I could find.
yeah, there is a quirky law there that comes from the old French colonial days that you cannot build a building taller than a palm tree. So you don't really see any like high rise resorts in St. Bart's like you do in other Caribbean islands or tropical destinations as a result.
And considering that they kind of have marketed their island as an exclusive place, that fits in, right? You don't want they've marketed themselves to not want the crowds and millions of people. They're a small island for the very well off.
Yeah, I mean, it has a reputation as a place where you want to go just to like live the life of luxury, but not really be found or bothered. Like, there's a notable hedge fund manager, Hugh Hendry, after he closed down his fund, he just kind of moved to St. Bart's and kind of hid out there and chilled indefinitely.
Which is a great story. I wouldn't hate for that to be my story ultimately. I mean,
I mean,
it sounds like a great
he ran a
story.
successful macro fund, so he has enough money to do it. More power to him.
Yeah, so Nick, what would you go and do there?
Well, I think a lot of people go there for the exact same reason I mentioned. They go there because they don't really need to do much of anything. Hopefully, there wasn't too much of a disturbance. My headphones fell out by accident. But um,
Well, I mean, I think that the attractions are the same as many other islands, but with less people.
yeah, there's several beaches. I mean, you have Gustavia, which has a lot of upscale shops and restaurants. It's in the main town. It's shaped like a horseshoe. It's very convenient to walk around. You have 14 major beaches. They're all white sand and open to the public at no cost. The beaches aren't even that crowded during peak season because there's only 10,000 people who live on the island. And given how hard it is to get there and how limited hotels are, it's it's not going to be crowded. A lot of yachts park there and chill by the main beach in Gustavia. You have Shell Beach, which has a lot of weekend festivities. There's very clear, warm water. If you want more remote beaches, there's Governor Beach and Saline Beach, which are known for being more undeveloped. And then you have several others, including St. John Beach, Flamins Beach, Colombier, which is known as Rockefeller's Beach. It's very famous for its seclusion and tranquil appeal. Lorient Beach, which is a more family-oriented one. And then you've got the Grand Cul-de-sac Beach, which is where a lot of the hotels and restaurants are. So, yeah, other than going to the beach and relaxing on a boat, I mean, you go do a lot of stuff that you do in other Caribbean islands: kite surfing, snorkeling, submarine trips, kayaking, paddle boats, yachting or sailing. You could play tennis. There's volleyball. They have a few hiking areas, and you could go horseback riding. And it's a popular place to get married for the rich and famous. And then in terms of hotels, like, this is not a cheap place. Like, I went to the Cayman Islands in November, and I was concerned about how expensive that place was. Like, I looked and just was scrolling around for hotels just out of curiosity. The cheapest hotel on the island is $234 a night, and most of them are in the four figures. And this is if you want to go in like the winter time, which is but not around Christmas, which is the peak, but say like November or February.
Well, its wealth is relative, man. That's all I can say.
Yeah, it's the only place that one of the few places I could look up that it makes the Cayman Islands and Newport Beach look affordable.
So when I read about visiting St. Bart's, one of the titles of a tourist website says it is common when you are meeting a group of people and expected to hug and kiss or shake hands of every individual as appropriate.
Yeah, it's very traditional French customs there. Um,
So, so how uncomfortable would you be, Nick, meeting a bunch of strangers?
yeah, I mean, I've been to France. That's kind of awkward as an American, to be honest. When you go down to place Latin cultures or France, and there are people a lot more touchy feely than you are. Uh, yeah.
So that brings up a good point: is the current virus epidemic and the lack of hugging, kissing, and shaking hands, which we all have our own customs put on hold to stay 6 feet away.
But do you think
And
that's really going on in St. Bart's? I mean, what's the odds? I don't really know. Has there been any cases there? It's not a very big island, and it's pretty remote, so you could shut it off if you wanted to.
I'm looking it up right now. I imagine there's a ton of people who have homes there as their second homes that have decided to leave New York City to go to St. Bart's.
Well, I know St. Bart's is known to be by far the safest island in the Caribbean. It has virtually zero crime, beyond maybe a few instances of petty theft per year. No muggers or pickpockets or drug dealers or anything like that on the island.
So, as of today, which is April 1st, and this is not an April Fool's joke, there are 59 cases on the island of St. Bart's and 2 deaths.
Wow, that's actually for how small it is. It's a very high percentage for like. I mean, let me look that up. Yeah, it's like
Well, I mean, like
six
one,
tenths of 1%. That's. I mean, this
that's
thing.
not, that's not very much.
That's more than say a lot of U.S. states.
Yeah. And that brings up another point is like, with the percentage of people actually being tested and the percentage of tests actually available, how relevant is that information in general?
That is a good point.
So what if it when someone says like there's like 100,000 people tested positive, like, well, what's the actual estimate of people tested positive or people that would test positive if you had everyone make a test right now? It's probably way higher.
Yeah, we're not going to be turned into a coronavirus debate show.
And then deaths, like if you test positive but you were driving to the golf course and you get hit by a car and you died, but you test positive, like that's not a COVID-19 death.
Well, different countries have different
That's I know
guidance on
people
what to
I know
do.
people different countries have different levels, and so comparing the different countries makes it impossible.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess you can't even St. Bart's is not a place you can escape the coronavirus. That's the lesson here. So before we end the show, I want to St. Bart's is a pretty small island. We kind of covered the bases here. What do you think, just from a bigger perspective, from a more island macro perspective, like how is this coronavirus thing going to impact the future of like Caribbean tourism and the Caribbean economy? 15% of GDP, which is a lot smaller than I thought it would, which is about a little less than double the ratio in the US of is tourist related in the Caribbean. Some it's more so, like St. Bart's is probably over half. Aruba is 86%, and Anguilla 62 are the two highest islands that I found published data on in terms of tourism as a percentage of their economy, whereas Cuba and Trinidad are the smallest. So
Well, I think that information is not enough to give you a forecast on an island by island basis because personally, I think cruise ships are dead for a very long time.
yeah,
Years.
yeah, we talked about this on our main show, Nothing Exempt. If you want to know more on our reason why we think the cruise ship industry is going to have a very difficult time recovering.
So, if the tourism industry on the island is not really significant for cruise ships, then it could be fairly untouched. But if the island in question is very reliant on cruise ships, they are in very big trouble.
Yeah, but I mean, people are going to still fly down to the Caribbean.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially St. Bart's. If you lived in New York City and you could escape to St. Bart's right now, you would. I don't have to even ask. 100% chance you would.
Yeah, I mean, I think St. Bart's might is fare relatively better just given its crowd, but at the same time,
Or even Paris. Say that you could leave Paris, which is shut down right now,
you know,
and you're
actually, I've
well off.
also noticed a lot of this coronavirus thing. It's hitting a lot harder, but maybe this is just my exposure among like the wealthy and socially elite than than just compared to the broad population. Maybe they just have the resources to get tested better. But I have noticed that this is that there's a
I
lot of
think
prominent
I
people have it.
I mean, I think as far as death rate, you're exactly the opposite. Is that poor people are more likely to have diabetes and hypertension, and so their death rate and hospitalization rate is much higher.
But I mean, just people catching it though.
Well, if you're rich though and you catch it and overall you live, who cares? Like honestly, you're well off and you're not dying. Like Prince Charles of England got it and he's fine. I think the problem is when you're a smoker and you're poor, you're overweight, you're just like and you're old, like you're definitely dead. Or you're very high risk. So I would say that the richer you are, the better off you are overall.
Do you think though that like a lot of the the cutoff of the decline of flight routes and or just like less disposable income for tourism? I mean, how are these Caribbean islands going to adapt?
Everybody's income will go down. Less money will be spent. But on the bright side, you live in a beautiful place. So if you get by with less and you live in a beautiful place, good for you. I'm happy for you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's going to be a challenge for a lot of these places.
Places that are independent countries and the amount of poverty that goes up, that'll be a problem. You become like a no-go zone for tourists overall if your poverty rate goes up high enough. There's like a line where nobody's going to be a tourist over there anymore. But St. Bart's is so far away from that line. I don't think that's even an issue.
I'm not really talking about St. Bart's specifically. I'm just thinking about the broader region because I think you're right. There is a difference. Like if you're if you're a European territory or an American territory in the Caribbean, you probably get support from the parent country, whereas these independent countries on the island are probably not.
Yeah, if you become Haiti, your tourist industry is dead forever. So
Oh,
don't be Haiti.
I'm when was the last time there was a tourist industry in Haiti? I think there was one in the past. I don't. It's not really in my memory though.
Or maybe a better example is Cuba. Maybe the largest tourist industry of any Caribbean island at the time of its revolution.
Well, yeah, that was more due to the U.S. embargoing it rather than mass
Okay,
scale
it
poverty.
was yeah, it wasn't because of poverty, but an event can take you out, and you are no longer the biggest tourist destination in the area.
Yeah, I mean, I think that could definitely happen to some of these places. I think with Cuba, like if they didn't have the revolution, I mean, we talked about this in the Cuba show. It would have been probably Las Vegas is today. It was that it had it, except on a tropical island. Like it was developing rapidly, and it even had like the signs of adding a major league baseball team to Cuba at one in the late 50s, early 60s, and you had it was the most popular tourist destination for a lot of people internationally for the eastern United States. Like, I mean, well, that's a big what if. There is what if Cuba um, kept its economy relatively open. Like, what if Castro um, decided to align with the U.S.?
Well, that's why we used to have a show called What If History, Nick, and And maybe someday we'll bring it back. But right now we're currently managing 3 different shows under the Nothing Exempt banner. So I don't think
Yeah,
that's coming back today.
I think we exhaust. The reason we ended that show, I think we exhausted all the interesting ones, at least to us.
Well, yeah, we got bored of it is probably the right answer. Obviously, that there's a never-ending list of things that could be what if history, but we got bored and so we stopped. So
It's actually kind of surprising is that the alternate history community has gotten a lot bigger than back when we were doing it. Like there's a lot of YouTubers who have very popular creating content in that field. A lot of the forums are popular in that space now. Like back when we were doing it in 2011, it was kind of just us blowing into the wind. Now it's like a whole little mini community.
it is a big regret of mine that audio is completely gone and that we didn't save it. Google Drive wasn't around at the time for me to save those things.
Yeah, I don't know if I still have any of them. I don't think so, unfortunately. Um, but I think we're getting a little bit off topic here. But the last question before we end is: would you go to St. Bart's?
Absolutely. I've already told you, Nick.
No.
Once you have a year where you make it real big, or if I do, like one of us makes it real big, we'll celebrate and go to St. Bart's. That's the destination. We can go
Yeah, I mean,
scuba diving with the fish, maybe some parasailing. We can do lots of fun things.
I actually am a lot more open to going to places like St. Bart's due to the whole coronavirus pandemic because I'm more hesitant now to go to more rustic island destinations or countries that have more developing economies and less robust healthcare systems, especially as I get older. So I'm now a lot more interested in going to a place like St. Bart's. I think trips tourism will be hurt, I think, by this coronavirus pandemic for those over 30 years old.
Absolutely. All those travel related shows, blogs, Instagrams, they're all hurt.
I think
Lots of people.
travel will still be around. I think it's just going to be more concentrated in places that are perceived to be less of a health concern. And I don't really know what that floor level is for a country and how to measure that, but that's going to be a variable that people didn't factor. Like, how good is the hospital system? What is the risk of contagious disease in this place that people didn't really think about in the past?
Okay. Well, hey, if you're listening, we appreciate that you made it to the end. Give us your feedback on what Nick just said. Would you still be a tripster? If you're listening to this show, you probably are a tripster. But otherwise, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear feedback, hear about islands you want to hear about next, hear what you thought about our audio and the island here today. The best places to do that are at Nothing Exempt on both Twitter and on our subreddit Nothing Exempt, or email Nick or Brian at nothingexempt.com. So thank you again for this wonderful time we spent with you, and I hope that we can speak with you soon. Talk to you soon.